Welcome to Michael's Record Collection. I'm extremely excited to have with me today singer, songwriter, multi instrumentalist, Neal Morse. Neal, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. How's it going, man?
It's going great. I'd like to ask you what I ask all my guests first up, and that is, Neal, what was your first favorite record?
Meet the Beatles.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. That was the first record I went crazy over. I was 4 years old.
Nice. Now, obviously, to get into the Beatles at age 4, you have to grow up in a household where the Beatles are being played. So is that pretty much how it was?
Seemed like music was being played everywhere around me in those days. Uh, that's how I remember it. I just remember, of course, my father was a choir director, so there was a lot of classical music going on. And my uncle was in a jazz vocal group called the High Lows, so I was exposed to jazz as well. So I was exposed to a lot of different styles when I was very young.
Hmm. And where did you and your brother, where did your love of progressive rock come from?
Well, I was into the Beatles and pop and folk music until I was about 9. Uh, so about I was born in 1960, so we're talking 1969, 1970, and then I really started to get into the power of rock. I got into Black Sabbath. Well, I mean, me and my brothers,
Hmm.
Richard and Al, we kind of traveled. We were traveling musically together. We had a little band. We were all learning to play together, and so we got into Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, and we went to see Black Sabbath at the LA Forum, and there was a band opening up for them that I hadn't heard of, but there was a buzz about them. I was hearing that they were really great, but this band was called Yes, and so that was the big light bulb moment for me, and I was 12, I think, because I didn't know that you could kind of have all the things that I loved about music in one piece.
Hmm.
It had the power of rock and the beauty of the 3-part harmonies when they did All Good People, um, and the kind of jazz elements and classical elements and all of this. And so, yeah, that was I was smitten. I I was became a prog fan instantly.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. You bring up Yes, and I've been enjoying the album that we came here to talk about today. An Evening of Innocence and Danger live in Hamburg comes out July 14th on Inside Out. And in the middle of the last song, when you're introducing the band, uh, you introduce Randy George, and he goes into Heart of the Sunrise on his bass.
Yeah, well, we're all big Yes fans in this group.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You, as always, a very busy man. You've got not only do you have the Neal Morse Band live album coming out in August, you've got another solo album, The Dreamer Joseph Part One, coming out. I believe that's on Frontiers, and which is great because it's called Part One, means we're going to get a Part Two. And you've got Morse Fest coming up. You're just constantly busy. Tell me, how does Neal Morse figure out his schedule? How does a Neal Morse schedule for the year work itself out? Do you just go day by day, or do you block off months? So how does it work?
Well, you have to plan a certain amount. I wish I could just go day by day, but um, yeah, because there's other people involved. The mixing engineer and the artwork. You have to start working on getting with the artwork people early, or else you're never going to deliver the albums anywhere near on time. Usually, if I'm working with a label, um, then they will tell me, we'll kind of work together on a schedule. Like, when do you think you can deliver this? And I'll say, well, let's see, I'm writing it now. I think, and you don't really know because it's the creative process. Like, let's say I can deliver this to you April 1st. I'll just, and then so we say, I have that as a guideline. I start working towards that. So I talk to the string players and the background singers, or the lead singers, as in this case,
Mm-hmm.
and you just start trying to get it all set up. But it's a challenge because, well, it's all a mountain of work. But you're dealing with creative stuff. So, like for example, right now I'm working on Joseph Part 2, and I got up to the end, and I've already had the string players play their parts, and I just changed the ending. And I really kind of need strings on it, but I don't know if I can, you getting all those people together, or with an engineer and all that. It's a lot just for like these changed couple bars. So it's hard to do it all in a perfect way, because it's just moving, and you're living with it, and then you'll listen down to the whole thing. When you're writing the little pieces, you may like all the little pieces, but then when you listen down to the whole thing, then you have another impression as well. So I think the way I would put it is, my planning is all a sketch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the people that I work with understand that it's the creative process, and so it's probably going to be late, is what that means. I don't usually get done early. I usually get done late. Sometimes I get done early, but not very often. Things generally take longer than I think they will.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of sketch out, like right now. Okay, I'm trying to deliver Joseph Part 2 to be mixed in July. Then I need to work on learning all my parts for Morse Fest in August. And also I need to go back through the tapes from Morse Fest 22 with Transatlantic, and see if any of that needs any love. And but then I'm hoping in the fall to take some time off.
It's hard to imagine you taking time off, Neal. It seems like you're just always working on something, and you've always been an extremely prolific writer. When did you write your first song?
I wrote my first song, I believe, when I was 12. Yeah, it was right around the same time. I did write a prog piece when I was 12. Yeah, and some of it wound up being used in a song called "Flow" with Spock's Beard.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love that song.
Yeah, some of those things, like that, sunlight gliding, children hiding. That was from when I was 12.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. That can come back and stick with you all those years later. But so you mentioned Spock's Beard. You obviously you and your brother started Spock's, and actually I talked a little bit about Spock's Beard too with Ryo Akamoto, who was on the show promoting his latest solo album. It's very well documented. You wrote about it in your book. You've talked about it at great length about your spiritual awakening, and how you felt a calling to, not necessarily a calling to leave Spock's Beard, but a calling to go to Tennessee, for example. And then you became more or less a solo artist for a while. You put out, a string of solo albums that were progressive rock, but also spiritually themed, like One and Question Mark, and obviously Testimony was a big one for you. That told your life story, and then Testimony 2 as well got into a little bit more detail. When did you start sort of putting the idea together that you could be in a band again?
Well, that was well, let's see. I was doing these kind of worship tours in Europe, because I felt like that's what God wanted me to do at that time, like 2006, 2007. And it was around that time that I think Colin Lagenar, he said, if you want to do some gigs over here, I could put a band together and learn all the material, and then you could show up and we could rehearse for like a day and go do some shows. So I mean, that was part of it, doing the shows with the Dutch band. Those were really fun and really good shows. And it was really when I had the idea for the actually a friend suggested that I write a concept album, a prog concept album called The Whirlwind, and that I should have Transatlantic do it, which was really out of the blue at that time. Anyway, that, as you know, that wound up happening, and what Transatlantic recorded was really different from what I originally had conceived. Just want to make that clear. But that was part of it too. It was a kind of a slow working back into being in bands again, and it's been great, you know. And then later on, at first, the Neal Morse band was a touring band for me. I wanted to have a. After a while, I got kind of tired of having two different bands, like one in Europe and one in here, and I wanted to have just one group. And so I started having YouTube auditions, and that's where I found Eric and Bill. Although I kind of knew Bill from before then, but anyway, and so we did a couple tours together, and then it was suggested that we write together, and I prayed about that and really felt like a green light inside, like, yeah, you should do that. And you know, look at the great fruit of the Neal Morse band. That's how that started. So
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of these guys. We'll tell everybody who's in the band: Neal Morse, keyboards, guitars, vocals; Mike Portnoy, who's maybe one of the few people that's been on more albums than you, on drums, percussion, vocals; Randy George, fretted and fretless bass; Bill Hubauer, piano, organ, synthesizers, and vocals; and Eric Gillette, guitars and vocals. And for me, and I talked to Bill about this a little bit, I think Eric is really the secret weapon of the Neal Morse band. He is a guy who maybe should be playing arenas in front of some rock band. He's just such an intense talent. It's You found him on YouTube, huh?
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, he's ridiculous. On the Dreamer, the Joseph album that's coming out in August, he takes a killer guitar solo. He also plays drums. His
Wow.
drumming, his drumming is outstanding. You know, he's playing drums on the Joseph album, and yeah, yeah, Eric, and his voice is great. You know, he looks great. He's just like, who is this guy? He can do anything. He can break dance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who's just like really good at all kinds of things. Like
Yeah.
we went to this party together, and all of a sudden, like, they start playing some Bruno Mars or something, and he gets out on the floor and starts like just doing all these moves. I'm like, what is going on? Yeah, Eric Gillette, man, he's from another planet.
Hidden talents. So yeah, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I've had everybody else from the Neal Morse band on the show. I need to get Eric next, so I gotta have to work on that. Um, your your band, Neal Morse band, you got a couple albums out. You at the same time, kind of in that same general time frame. You're also working on Flying Colors. So Flying Colors and Neal Morse band, very different, but both have you and both have Mike in them. Tell me what you thought about, again, we went back to talking about your joining a band or having a band, and being a part of that again, but now being a part of two different bands, and I guess three if you count Transatlantic. What was the thought behind Flying Colors?
Well, it started with we had a mutual friend that had suggested that we write together, and we both really wanted to do that, but it was very difficult for us to get together. And finally, this friend called me and said, "Hey, I happen to know that Steve's available this week." But we had been talking about him flying his airplane up here to Nashville, and but this person said, I think if this is going to happen, you're going to have to go down there and write with him. And I did. Spent just like, I think only 2 days, maybe 3, with him, and that there was a real, simpatico energy there that was really special. Definitely great chemistry. And so then it was a little while. It was sometime after that we actually chose the players and and then bringing Casey in really changed the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to have a different singer, and yeah, Casey's just so different and interesting and emotional, and yeah, there's just a lot of magic around that group, man. It's a
Yeah.
very special group.
So your album, your new live album's coming out in July. You guys recorded this in Hamburg at the Markt Hall. Um, I'm curious because you've done a lot of live albums. Do you know going into the tour which stop you're going to record the live album at?
Not usually. Sometimes there's talk about it, in the beginning. Um, but on this one, Jerry Guidros, who was running front of house, he brought a recording rig, so he recorded several shows. I don't remember how many, but it was such a special show. It was the audience was so amazing. I mean, the whole thing was just off the chart, fantastic. When we came off stage, I think Mike said, "Hey, if we're thinking about releasing a live album from this tour, this is the one." And so it was always we had always talked about that we should release the Hamburg one because it just stood out to all of us as a really even more explosive than usual kind of night for the band.
Yeah, it was a very energetic performance on this. The crowd is great, like you mentioned, and you have obviously Germany is a place where progressive rock music is very much appreciated, but you seem to have beyond that a spiritual connection with that country in particular. Is that something that you have felt yourself? Because it kind of seems that way when you look at your career and how many times you've been over there and you've done worship stuff there and that kind of thing. Is that what you think too, that you've had a spiritual connection with that country?
Well, yeah, I felt called to Germany and Holland and Europe in general, actually. So I've had a lot of worship services and meetings and at concerts, all kinds of things. It's just really interesting how God will connect you with a place. Not only that, but I have relatives. My brother married a German girl. I have a German nephew near Frankfurt. I have, then Inside Out is my good friends, Thomas Waber and Freddie's actually in London. But yeah, it's just really interesting how you can wind up being so connected in another country.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my best friends are Germans. It's just something that God did.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of connections, I was interested in your. You've done a lot of work with Ted Leonard, who obviously has gone on to front Spock's Beard, after you and after Nick. What is that relationship? Where did that relationship start, and how did that develop?
Well, it started with excuse me. It started many years ago. I think 98, maybe. Enchant was opening up for Spock's Beard in Europe. So we spent 2 weeks, a gloriously fun, insane 2 weeks on a tour bus together with Enchant. Ted was 24, I think. Yeah, this was like kind of a legendary, really, for the fun factor. It was just funny. All those guys are hilarious.
Yeah.
Doug and Ted, and all the guys in Enchant, and all the Spock's guys were. It was just a funny, thrilling time. So, Ted and I were always connected from that. And then I don't remember all of how we wound up being together. I heard his solo album. I think he sent me his solo album, and I listened to it and went, "Wow, that's really cool. Who's that on drums? That's got to be Nick." Of course, it was. So I started connecting with him about his solo stuff, and then that was before he was in Spock's,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just love his voice, and he's such a great guy, and so we wound up I'm just like, hey, would you sing on this? And we've just been involved with each other in Transatlantic and lots of other things. So it's just a really good relationship.
Yeah, I had forgotten that they had opened for you. I remember the first Cal Prague Enchant, and you were both on the bill there.
Was that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm forgetting. I mean, yeah.
In
Oh, and
fact,
Ted's hilarious too. What a sense of humor. I
yeah,
mean, he's
gregarious guy, very outgoing. Yeah, I found that to be true. And the other guy that I know you played on the same bill with and has been doing work with you recently has been on the show, John Galgano from Is.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was really cool. He came down and played bass on the God Smuggler reading that we had in Houston, which was just really great. I mean, he did such a good job. We watched it recently. I had people over. I did just a one camera shoot of the stage. Um, it's camera audio, so it's not that great. But we had some friends over to watch it recently, and so I got to experience how great John was. It was so nice of him to come and do that for us.
Now I know he was excited to get to work with you, so so it worked out well for both of you. And Innocence and Danger, the live version, you went out and you played. I think on the album, I don't know if you played more in the show than is on the album, but on the album you've got, I think, everything in order except for Emergence and Not Afraid Part One.
Oh, I don't remember. Is it in a different order?
No, it's in the order that is on the studio album. So this bad boy here, this is,
Oh,
by the
okay.
way, this is the beautiful deluxe edition. It's amazing. They do such good work. But yeah, it's almost the entire album in the order that it's on the record. And then there's also Waterfall, and you end with the Great Similitude medley. So you've done some of these medleys before, both for your for Transatlantic, for your solo stuff, and for Neal Morse band. How do you guys decide which songs, which bits are going to be in the medleys?
That's a really good question. Sometimes it changes even after we decide. I think we had at the beginning of the Innocence and Danger tour, we weren't doing Long Day at the end. I think we ended with um, A Love That Never Dies. And then I made a pitch. I know everybody was feeling like, oh God, my hands are full. I don't want to have to learn any more music. But I made a pitch, like I made this little edit with Long Day on there too, because it's just so powerful. And you want to leave everybody just, all the way in the heavens. And so it changes a lot. And depending on the group, there's a lot of discussion about what songs to put in the melody and what not to put in and how to fit them together. And yeah, I actually did that one. That one was me, but sometimes it's other people are really spearheading it, and it doesn't really matter who does it. It's really all about the audience. Is it or is it rocking their world?
Right, right. Um, yeah, I would imagine that Mike has ideas when you ask those questions.
Yeah, yeah, he does. But he doesn't usually put medleys together.
Hmm.
He generally has a lot of comments about it later, and of course, he's got amazing ideas. He's a very smart guy.
Yeah, so really great arranger.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah. What a mind.
One of the one of the songs on the album and on the live album, you guys did a cover of Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. Obviously, put your own spin on it. Where was the genesis of deciding to do that song, and how you would decide who would sing which parts?
Well, it was because we had too much material. When we were writing the Innocence and Danger album, we were just kind of going along, just sort of following. Oh, this seems like it should end here. Oh, let's do another song. Oh, well, how about this? Let's start with Randy's riff and I'll sing over it. We're just kind of just going. And then thinking that we would listen back through later and cut stuff. We wanted it to be one disc.
Mm-hmm.
But when we went back through it, nobody wanted to cut anything. So we had too much material for one disc and not enough for two discs. So then there was this idea of like, well, what if we pad it with, and I think that's where I think also the way it has to be, or the way it had to be, was from that concept. It wasn't, that was Mike and Bill kind of put that idea together. They, that because that was something left over from the Great Adventure sessions, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
That it used. And so then Bill wrote a bridge for it. Like, what if we make a whole song out of it? Because it was just a little section.
Mm-hmm.
And then it still wasn't enough. Like, well, what about a cover? And so Bill started, he's the master of the prog covers. And so he started throwing out things that he had thought about. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. And he played me some pretty developed things. I was like, I don't know. I wasn't that inspired about it. But then when he suggested, he's like, I have this idea about Bridge Over Troubled Water. And the other guys had already flown home. The only person who was still here was Mike, but he wasn't here yet because he doesn't get here till the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And we're morning riders. So basically, Bill and I started thinking of it, along the lines kind of what Yes did with America.
Okay.
That was our goal, to, like, as a kind of model. And so we just started kicking around. It's a really very fun thing to do. Like, take different elements of the song. Everything in there has some element of the intro or the melody, but it's so I don't know if anybody would even recognize like I was thinking like a bridge over troubled water. It's just like it's pretty far removed, some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I played the melody on that auto wah guitar, that wow 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 when you're weary. Oh, we had a lot of fun with it, and it turned out to really soar at the end, and really, really be an impactful thing for the heart.
Yeah. No, you do this throughout all your songs. You have multiple singers. Everybody in the group sings pretty much, except maybe Randy. And you guys all have very distinct voices, but they complement each other very well. So is it just a matter of figuring out who sounds best on which part, or is it a matter of who sort of feels an ownership of that bit?
It's both. Generally, it's obvious. Sometimes I think we'll have two different people sing something and then vote, but rarely.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally like, oh, Bill should sing this, or I should sing this, and then Eric should sing this, and we've wound up coming into, like you do in groups, coming into a kind of way that works, which is Eric in the middle, me on the bottom, Bill on the top, is generally how the harmonies are. Mike only sings if there's an extra part needed, an extra background part, or
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, or if he has a lead part, he sings lead also on some stuff, which is great. But yeah, it's pretty apparent usually.
Okay. Talk a little bit about Joseph Part 1. You mentioned you're already working on Part 2. You've got Steve Morse back, Eric Gillette, Ted Leonard, Matt Smith, Will Morse, your son, Talon David, and Jake Livgren. And this is a special release you're going to do just from Radiant Record Shop. You're going to have 300 copies of a Brick Orange 2 LP vinyl version, which I think is really cool. So that'll be fun for the collectors. And then you're also going to sign the first 200 pre-orders.
I'm gonna do it. My wife's always like, "Oh God, not again." No, she takes the we don't usually get, for some reason we can't get them not shrink wrapped, so we have to take the shrink wrap off. So she takes the shrink wrap, gets the Sharpies out, lines them up for me. We've got this whole husband and
Process.
wife signing tradition.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then the cool thing here is you got a little Willy Wonka golden ticket thing going on with a prize. Five of them are randomly going to have a signed copy of the lyric sheet to the song "Like a Wall."
Well, handwritten, actually. I'm going to rewrite the song. I
Okay.
chose that one because it's very short.
Less writer's cramp for you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. See, a couple of the things that I want to touch on before we go is you've been very creative as an artist, not just in your music. You've also found ways to reach your fans. Like anybody can have a fan club, but you put together the Neal Morse Inner Circle where everybody pays a monthly fee, and then every other month you get like a full album's worth of material or a video of some sort. I've been a member of that for quite some time, and I don't know how many of your discs I have before they started going digital, but uh, where did the idea for that come from? Because that is an idea that I think probably more artists should employ.
Well, I think it was around 2000. I think the first one was in 2005. I was looking for alternate. My kids were still pretty little, 7 and 5, I think, around that time. And I was really feeling like I shouldn't travel. I think it was important for me to be home. But they're like, well, how are we going to make ends meet? Was really honestly how that was. And I was looking for alternate ways to have income, to create income. And yeah, so had this thought about a kind of a fan club thing. I mean, groups have been doing that for a long time, and the Beatles had a fan club, and they
Mm-hmm.
recorded special things for the fan club and stuff like that. So I certainly didn't invent it. I just decided, well, what would make it worth them, paying $10 a month or whatever. And so I felt like 6 releases a year was worth it, and the newsletter. And
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I'm just really thankful that there was enough people that wanted to do it, that we were able to do it for all those years. Still
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, the that's the thing is that a lot of these maybe you get something at the end of the year around Christmas time, but you were putting out essentially a new album's worth of material every 2 months for the fans, and some of that was extremely interesting. The stuff that you collaborated with Phil Kagi, for example, some of that stuff was really great. The stuff that you
Yeah.
dug out of the archives from stuff you wrote in the '80s was really cool, and your musicals, Hitman and Homeland, and stuff like that. That's all very interesting stuff, and it's so varied. And there's worship stuff in there. There's really proggy stuff. You went acoustic improv,
Yeah.
just all kinds of different things. It's again, it just comes back to how prolific you are as a writer.
Well, I'm somebody that likes to share. Like not everybody, not all musicians, want to share their outtakes and things, but I kind of enjoy it. So I was always a little frustrated because there's you get like your frontline release things, the studio albums and live albums that are really pristine, but there's a lot of other stuff, especially in this day and age. There's a lot of other stuff that's filmed. I film a lot of me working in the studio. I love, the making ofs are really interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I like to share all kinds of things. And I know that like a certain amount of people would really enjoy hearing this, but it's not good enough to release through a label into the shops or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
So the Inner Circle has been a wonderful outlet for me as an artist.
yeah. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and in this day and age, especially when artists are fighting to get tenths of pennies for streaming services, Neal Morse creates his own streaming service, Waterfall.
Yeah, well, I mean, you probably know the story. I was pretty upset, like probably most artists at my level would be, about the streaming services, and because it's not paying you again, at my level, hardly anything at all,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and they don't even put CD players in cars or computers anymore. Like my daughter doesn't even know what to do with a CD. I give her a CD and she's like, "Dad, I don't have any place to play this. Let alone vinyl." She doesn't have any place to play vinyl. So it really is a challenge with my kids. Like, how can I get this to you? Can you listen on Dropbox? How can I want to send my son music. Um, they pretty much only listen on Spotify or Apple and so anyway, so I was streaming something one day and I was like, man, this is awesome. You mean I don't have to get up from my recliner to change the music and the phone rings and it pauses? You talk on the phone and then it starts right back where you were and you didn't even have to get up. That's important when you're 62. But anyway, and then you just go in your car and you Bluetooth it and you start the music right where it was.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to it's just, I realized how streaming was here to stay, and it's great. It's so great for the listener. And so I was like, well, what can I do? And so I started talking to some techie friends about the possibility of creating my own thing, because to me it just doesn't make sense to be on the streaming services. It's just like, well, I mean, I'm glad people are listening. I mean, it makes sense in that regard. It is kind of a question, you
Yeah.
know. So I have some stuff on the streaming services, you'll notice, and I have other stuff not there. So I don't know. I'm trying to be everywhere at once in a little bit, but I want people to of course, get on Waterfall, and there's a lot more stuff there. I'm trying to provide a lot of interesting content. So there's things on Waterfall that aren't available anywhere else.
Yeah, that's important too. For finding a place in the marketplace. Just you have, like you mentioned, you have stuff on Spotify, some stuff on Tidal, and some of that, but it's limited. So you're just giving people a taste. It's a marketing tool, but if you want everything Neal Morse and all the related stuff, you can get it on Waterfall.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. That, I mean, most people wouldn't think to just create their own. But you always think outside the box, Neal. I have to say that about you. So when you put together an album like this, and I know you put a lot of thought into the package, the whole package. So these deluxe editions that Transatlantic has, Neal Morse has, Neal Morse Band has, they're always very special. Does that is that something that you have somebody that you work with on that, or are these ideas all coming from you? How does that sort of come together?
We work on it together. It's Mike's very, very good with that kind of stuff about creating special packages. But yeah, we always, for a long, long time, the special edition and the limited edition and uh, Inside Out's very, very helpful with those things. In fact, they request them like, hey, can we do one with this? Is there more content we could add and do one with a special art cover? So it's great, and the fans seem to really love it.
Now, with the vinyl resurgence, will there be some vinyl releases of your back catalog? Is that anything planned for that?
I want to do that. I just haven't had the time to really work on it. I've talked to different people about, hey, can I job this out to you? Like, but I don't really want to. My hands are so full creating stuff. I don't really want to get involved too much in the logistics of those things. But yes, we will do it eventually.
Great.
It needs to be done.
Yeah. All right. Well, after Joseph Part Two and Morse Fest upcoming, what's next for Neal Morse?
There's a trio album. DiVirgilio, Morse, and Jennings will be coming out, a second a follow-up release is coming out in November. I think they're going to release the videos and things in September. So pre-orders will start for that in September. The God Smuggler musical is also happening. We did a reading of the first act. And so next year, I think we're going to do a full workshop. And then the year after that, actually stage it. So that's in the future. I'm going to take some time off in the fall, and we'll see what happens next.
All right. I'm glad you brought up the trio there, because that was one I hadn't even brought up. I do have it, but there's just so much going on. I could talk to you for a full hour just about each Spock's Beard record that you were on, for that matter. But Neal Morse from the Neal Morse Band, from Transatlantic, Flying Colors, DiVirgilio, Morse Jennings, Morse Portnoy, George,
Right.
the covers. I mean, you have so many. I went through this with Mike as well. Just too many to name. It's been
Right.
such a pleasure to catch up with you. I'd love to have you back on sometime to talk about maybe one of these Spock's Beard old classic records that comes up on an anniversary or something. But it's been great talking to you. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and best of luck with the new live album and the new Joseph album.
Thank you so much, man. God bless you. Take care.